Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter.
Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but what's the story in Balamory? Wouldn't you like to know? Yes, the beloved kids show is coming back, apparently. This was a bit of a surprising piece of news, but it is happening. This was confirmed by the BBC in a post on the BBC News site. It's saying that the kids show is getting a reboot. Now, I'm sure a lot of you will be like, oh my god, Balamory, I remember that. What a great show that was. I remember growing up or watching with younger brothers and sisters, etc. For some of you who maybe are even a bit younger, you might be like, what on earth are you talking about? Balamory was one of the first big shows to launch on CBeebies when that launched as a channel. It was all the way back in 2002, well over 20 years ago. And the premise was, in this fictional place, Balamory, you'd go and you'd meet all these different characters. You'd have the school teacher, the policeman, the artist, and a whole lot more. And it was basically to challenge preschoolers. You know, there'd be things to solve or things to do. And the idea would be that the audience, the kids, would get it before the characters would get it. So they'd feel that sense of accomplishment. It was a really heartwarming show. Admittedly, when I was growing up, I think I was a bit too old for Balamory when it dropped. But I did have a younger brother, so that's mainly how I watched it. And it was always on before I had to go to school as well. I remember that in the mornings when you're like having your breakfast and stuff. It was always on then. But the article begins by saying children's favourite Balamory is set to return 2 decades after it was last filmed. The BAFTA-winning preschool programme about the fictional town of Balamory was originally set in Tobermory, the colourful harbour town on the Isle of Mull. Yes, people were like, it's a real place. Well, of course it's a real place. They didn't just build that from scratch, certainly not for a preschool programme. Yes, Tobermory is this harbour town on the Isle of Mull. It does actually have those colour-fronted buildings. It's quite an iconic location, and I believe that Balamory filming there, you know, really did wonders for the place in terms of tourism, in terms of people, you know, knowing the location. The show centred around a nursery school and its teacher, Miss Hooley, attracting 2 million viewers a week in the UK at its peak and watched by millions more around the world. Now, you might think 2 million viewers, even, you know, back then in the early 2000s, you might think, well, that's not all that good. But you got to remember, this was airing exclusively on CBeebies, the channel that was aimed at preschoolers. You know, those sorts of channels rarely crack 1 million viewers, so the fact it was getting around 2 million viewers a week is really impressive. 2 new series of the show, commissioned for a reboot on CBeebies in 2026, are expected to include some of the original characters. Now, that was a big part of what made Balamory so special. It was the characters. They were very likable, they were very memorable. I already mentioned Miss Hooley, the teacher. You know, she'd be the one introducing the episodes every day, and everyone remembers the hairstyle, the outfit, the accent. You know, they're truly a beloved character of this century, and the actor who plays her, Julie Wilson-Nimmo, is equally as beloved. Like, watch any interview with her, like post Balamory. She's a bundle of joy, isn't she? You've also got people like PC Plum, played by Andrew Agnew. He was one of the most memorable characters I remember because Balamory was always crime-free. You know, you weren't getting like murder scenes or anything like that on this program. So PC Plum didn't really have that much to do. He was more just like patrolling the town, watching the wildlife, sort of observing what he could, helping out where he could. But he stuck out as well. The programme, which was produced from 2002 to 2005, became famous for its catchy theme tune, which began, "What's the story in Balamory? Wouldn't you like to know?" And I'm pretty sure for many people of the last few generations, if you just said that first line, "What's the story in Balamory?" they'd instantly know what to say next. BBC Children's and Education said the new programmes would be filmed in Scotland, either in Tobermory or possibly another Scottish location, such as Rothesay on the Isle of Bute. Now, this would be a huge shake-up because I think such a key part of the Balamory iconography was Tobermory and, you know, the sort of harbourside view, that some of the houses were these fabulous colours. Now, I know in the production they said that they did paint some houses to make it the colours they wanted, but particularly, you know, that seafront that it has, that is such an iconic part. And when you just look at Rothesay, or Rothesay, I'm definitely saying it wrong. When you look at this place on the Isle of Bute, right, you can see it bears some similarities. You know, it's sort of that, it's got that harbour, it's got that seafront, etc. From what I can see on the pictures, it doesn't have like the brightly coloured buildings that Tobermory has, but I'm sure that, you know, with careful negotiation from the BBC, they can work that out. A statement from the BBC department said exact details of the revamped shows had yet to be developed. The team is interested in ideas from producers for 2 series of 10 14-minute programmes, it added. So, again, the format of Balamory I thought was always quite simple. It was quite accessible. But, you know, it has been nearly 20 years. Times have moved on. How can they redevelop the format that is going to capture that new preschool generation, you know, who are largely raised on things like TikTok and all this other short form content where attention spans are a lot lower? How is Balamory going to do that for a new generation? Kate Morton, the head of commissioning for 0 to 6-year-olds, said a whole new generation will discover and enjoy Balamory as we bring families together with this new update for CBeebies. It will be a real treat for parents who grew up with the show to now introduce their little ones to the brightly coloured world, getting to know a host of old and new characters together. So right off the bat there, you're getting the idea that it's not just going to be this old cast of characters. We are going to get new characters as well, which I personally think is a good thing. You know, as much as myself and a bunch of others have that, you know, place for the original, we remember it really fondly, particularly those characters. I think, you know, new generations won't have that association. You need to get new characters in that they can associate with, that they can then remember fondly, with a smattering of the old ones. Like, you know, you've got to have Miss Hooley, man. You know, she's like the whole crux, the whole focal point of the show. You've got to have her in it, surely. Balamory was broadcast around the world, becoming a hit with young audiences in Europe, Australia, Hong Kong, Canada, and South Africa. So yes, this wasn't just a UK thing, like a lot of hit CBeebies shows at that time. You know, think the Teletubbies, think the Tweenies. This was being sold and broadcast worldwide. It was big. Over 152 episodes, I'm certain they made more than that. I thought it was around 250. Problems in the island community were worked out by 8 main characters: the teacher, police officer, inventor, school bus driver, painter, fitness instructor, and the 2 shopkeepers, sometimes with the help of celebrity guests. Yes, they actually get celebrities on this show. I do actually remember one episode where Terry Wogan, of all people, appeared on the program, which was really special. Obviously, he's long past now, but he's still very beloved. So the fact that he appeared on this cute little CBeebies show is quite funny. Andrew Agnew, who played PC Plum and now works in the theatre, told BBC Scotland's Lunchtime Live the announcement was very exciting. If they ask me to go back, then I'll absolutely be there with bells on, I'm sure, he said. But at the moment, we're all just getting excited at the fact that it's happening. I don't think it would be the same if we weren't involved in it, he added. I think it needs us. I sort of get where he's coming from. Again, I think I guess if you're saying you're having some of them back, it's then like picking and choosing who wants to come back, who's available to come back. There are members of the cast who are sadly no longer with us either, so in that sense it's quite impossible. But no, I do think some of the original cast definitely can have a place in this new show, for sure. Agnew said he didn't think PC Plum would have been promoted up the ranks in crime-free Balamory over the past 2 decades. I think he'd still be doing his day-to-day job because that's what he loved. He loved looking after people, the wildlife, the whole thing. He first realised the show would be a hit when he heard the songs, and then saw the colourful houses where they would be filming in Tobermory. Kids got to be the people who knew what was going to happen before we did, so the characters were always one step behind the kids, Agnew said. I think that was why it was so popular. And that's sort of what I was talking about before. The whole crux, like the whole idea of the show was, yes, obviously for adults who are watching with kids, this was remarkably simple. The characters probably seemed very naive and probably a bit daft, but the idea was you were letting the kids figure it out. You wanted the kids to figure it out before the adults on the screen did. Again, that would make them feel really clever, really accomplished, and it helped, I guess, just sort of stimulate the mind, give them a bit of a challenge here and there. Julie Wilson-Nimmo, who played nursery teacher Miss Hooley in the original show, told the Daily Record it was the craziest and best news ever that Balamory is coming back. I seriously think this is bigger than the Oasis reunion, added Julie, who was also appearing on BBC Scotland's Scott Squad and CBeebies' Olga de Polga. And yeah, do you know what? I think she's right. Liam Noel Gallagher, get out of here. Oasis ain't nothing compared to Balamory coming back. That's gonna be mad. Julie has previously said she'd love to work on a new series. Indeed, they have. We'll talk about that in a sec. And Miles Jupp, who played Archie the Inventor, who lived in the Bright Pink Castle, went on to a career in comedy, film, and TV, with credits including Sherlock Holmes, Outnumbered, and The Crown. So yes, actors did go on and do other like well-known things. And I do remember hearing a story though, Miles being like, I do love Balamory, but it is causing problems with like my comedy gigs and stuff, because I think parents thought, oh well, that's Archie off the telly, so it's going to be age appropriate. And from what he was insinuating, it most definitely wasn't. Balamory also recently celebrated its 20th anniversary a couple of years ago, and you might remember, there was a spate of interviews. We saw Julie and Andrew appear on This Morning to commemorate 20 years and to talk about the show. And also at the time, they added 25 episodes specifically from Series 4 onto BBC iPlayer. When they chatted with the actors, they they're fine with that because they think, they got better as they went along.
That Andrew was saying this morning that it's episode 4 they went in at, which is good. Yeah. So we got better because it's at first when you watch the first season, there's a lot of looking off camera what's going on, and it's hysterical for us because they wanted to do it quite ad hoc, which is great. So by season 4 we kind of kicked in.
But yeah, 25 episodes from series 4 just seems like a really random amount. But I don't know if it's to do with like licensing or rights, because there is a history of that. So this is just a bit about the show's original cancellation, because again, with a lot of these programs you might think, well, they're so wildly successful, yet they were only on air or like made episodes for 3 or 4 years. Why is that? Well, it says in April 2005 the BBC announced it would no longer order another season of the series, citing they wanted to experiment and create more new program ideas. The show continued to be repeated on CBeebies until July of 2016. That is a long shelf life. By then, only the first 2 series, Series 1 and 2, except the last episode of Series 2, continued to be repeated, as the last 2 series, Series 3 and 4, as well as the last episode of Series 2, could not be repeated due to licensing issues from 2010 onwards. Now, I'm not involved in that sort of thing, but we all know in TV there's always like licensing things with different people, but that's so wonderfully specific, isn't it? Series 3 and 4, you can sort of understand, that's a whole block, but the last episode of Series 2 can't be repeated either. If regardless if only half the show was being repeated, that's still a lot of episodes that were pushing 10 years old by the time the repeats finally stopped. There might be 1 or 2 generations who are familiar with Balamory and are fond of it, who didn't necessarily watch it on first broadcast, a testament, similar to the Tweenies in a way, testament to a very long shelf life. But I think this is just really exciting. I've already seen the buzz on social media that people who were kids who are now parents or, have cousins to look after, nieces, nephews, are so excited at the prospect of showing them a new version of Balamory. I mean, it's got to have the theme song, hasn't it? They'd be missing a huge trick if it didn't have the theme song. And just to touch on some of the characters briefly, obviously you've got Miss Hooley, we've touched on. She's the nursery teacher, sort of the main character as well, truly beloved, still a rock star. Archie, we've already touched on a bit as well. He's the inventor, lives in the pink castle. I really love this character. He was very artsy, very cool, very quirky. Josie Jump, who was actually played by 2 different actors. A lot of people forget that. She was first played by Buki Akib in Series 1 and 2, and then Kasaya Haddad in Series 3 and 4. So she was a fitness instructor. She'd often be teaching you like exercise and to get yourself moving, which is always a very valiant cause. And from what I remember, it wasn't really shoved down your throat. It was just sort of incorporated very seamlessly. I do remember being in school, there was this rumor that one of the actors, I can't remember which one, but one of the actors playing Josie Jump actually game-ended themselves. Now, I don't believe that's actually true. It's just one of those silly school rumors, about various things in TV that float around, but that stuck with me for some reason. You have Edie McCready, who's played by Juliet Kadzow, and they're the bus driver, yes, and they're always... If there was like a traveling episode, they were the character to go to or to get around Balamory itself, always really cheery, as they all were. But yeah, Edie McCready, I always remember that. PC Plum we've touched on as well. As Balamory's a crime-free village, he watches the wildlife. What a cushy job as a policeman. You don't actually have to arrest anyone. You don't actually have to break up any violent scenarios. You can just, sit back, chill, relax. If only crime-free villages actually existed, eh? You had Spencer, who was played by Rod Christensen, who was a painter. And I believe, if you're going off what some of the other actors said, is in Las Vegas now, which is pretty cool. But yeah, he was like one of the musical ones. I remember the musical ladder, climbing up the musical ladder. Climbing up the musical ladder. Rushing in, just can't stop. And then the final 2, you had Susie Sweet and Penny Pocket, who ran Pocket and Sweet. So Susie Sweet was played by Mary Riggins, and Penny Pocket was played by Kim Zerkety. So Susie Sweet was more like the grandma of Balamory. She was a bit older. She had that grandmotherly vibe about her. She has, unfortunately, passed away now. So she passed away quite a while ago, I think 2013, something like that. So she won't be appearing naturally in the new series. I don't know whether they'll just recast the character or if they'll get maybe 2 new shop owners. Who knows? And then Penny Pocket uses a wheelchair. And I think you've got to remember, back in the early 2000s, the focus on like diversity and showing different kinds of people wasn't as strong as it is now. But I think that was really important. I remember, even though I was watching, you know, because my younger brother was watching, I hadn't seen that many people in wheelchairs on kids' TV, maybe in like animated shows and stuff like that. But in terms of like live action, real people, I hadn't really seen someone portrayed like that before, and that is hugely important, and I'm sure that's something they're going to continue in the reboot. I do think that, you know, different kinds of people are certainly going to play into this reboot, as it should, you know, because there are all different kinds of people from all walks of life, and I think the more you can introduce children to different kinds of people, just to get them familiar with, you know, not everyone is going to look like you, sound like you, even like walk like you, you know, I think that is an important message to get across to generations as they're growing up. As it should be. But, you know, Balamory has also been the target of some memes. I remember, like, there was an era where various YouTube poops of Balamory were big in fashion. We're talking, like, 10, 12 years ago. I remember one specifically that I love, but it's not on YouTube anymore, it seems, which is heartbreaking. I should have saved it. If any of these still exist, they're pretty, you know, like YouTube poops are, they're pretty wild. But on the whole, I'm glad it's coming back. You know, sometimes with reboots or reviving franchises, I err on the side of caution. And it is a bit ironic how they cancelled the show originally because they wanted to explore new ideas, which is always really key in television. And yet, here we are 20 years later going back to an old idea, hoping to, I guess, get some of the same success. And do you know what? I think initially they definitely will. The name is strong enough, the brand is strong enough. If they get some of the old cast back, then that's strong enough as well. But it'll more be about what this new format is. How are they going to reinvent it for the current generation? You know, 20 years down the line, how different can they make it? How similar is it going to be? What's the cast going to look like? That's all to come. We'll find out in 2026 if the UK TV industry hasn't fully gone belly up by then. But that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like on it. Let me know in the comments down below. Are you looking forward to the Balamory reboot? Do you think all the cast will come back that are around, or some of them, or do you think it should be a completely new slate? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new as well. We'd love to have you aboard. In the meantime, I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show. And a special thank you to Macra, Bruce Danton, Derek Chambers, Shaun Knock, Daud Khan, Liam De-Maine, Trev Hughes, Ajmac 200017, Deck, Evonne Hart41, Jen, Traffy, Tim Ripley, Mr. Eurovision 1986, Ted Elliott, Marnanel Thurman, John Wakefield, Kieran Bolton, and 40-something Manchild, our AMTV staff members.